Good afternoon, good afternoon. Thank you so very much for being here. I'm Beatrice Amberman. I am the chair of the Forums Committee for the Virginia Beach Human Rights Commission. And at this moment, I would like to ask my colleagues, members of the Virginia Beach Human Rights Commission, to stand up or raise their hands because they're gonna be helping here. They're gonna be around passing cards for you and also bringing the microphone in case you need to ask questions and they have to come to you. And thank you, welcome to our community forum, Community Conversations, Affordable Housing. The Virginia Beach Human Rights Commission was established in 1992 with a mission to institute, conduct, and engage in educational and informational programs for the promotion of mutual understanding and respect among citizens and the fulfillment of human rights. To serve as a forum for discussion of human rights issues, to conduct studies, and propose solutions for the improvement of human relations in the city. Also, to provide assistance to persons who believe their rights have been violated by identifying the appropriate federal, state, or local agency to address the complaint and referring such persons to the persons that they need to contact in other agencies. And before we begin, let me just, first of all, give a few matters that you need to be aware for the forum. First and foremost, please remember, this is a respectful conversation for our moderators and panelists, and we love for you to share your thoughts and experiences with all of us. We also have distributed cards and pens so that you can write your questions down, and we will do that at the end of each panelist's presentation. Please give your completed cards to one of the commissioners, and I will share your questions with the panelists during the question and answer period. And I don't see any children, but in case they come, just help them to make sure that they have supervision at all times and there is no wandering in the halls. And lastly, the bathrooms are in the hall towards the left side. And if you are sitting in the back, we advise that if you could please use the back doors up there because people are gonna be taping this important forum for our community later on, and so we don't want people to cross right there. Thank you so very much. So after the panel discussion, there will be a community fair in the Folio Libres rooms, which are across the hall, and we will have resource tables from local organizations that you can speak with and learn more about the work they do in our community. Today, we present our forum as an opportunity to discuss access to housing and housing affordability, which directly or indirectly affects all of our lives. Housing is not just a policy issue. It's the foundation of dignity, health, education, and opportunity. Today, we gather as advocates, partners, and problem solvers. We are here to learn from one another, to lift up solutions that prevent displacement, expand affordable options, and protect the families who make our communities strong. The forum is a reminder that while the challenges are real, so is our collective power. So today, let's spark new ideas and deepen our partnerships. Together, we can build a future where every family has a place to call home. We hope that we all live here with a little more understanding and some guidance on how to navigate the challenges of affordable housing. So thank you for being part of this work. And now it's going to be my pleasure to introduce our panelists today. And I'm going to start by telling you that as I introduce the speakers, I'm going to ask them to, we are videotaping this for our community. So as I introduce you, I'm going to have you have an introduction from your community, from your organization, and for yourself. So as I mentioned, each one of you, you are welcome to use that time to present a little bit of your work in the community. And I'm going to start with Melissa Bonfiglio. Melissa graduated from the University of Virginia and the UCLA School of Law. Since joining the Legal Aid Society of Eastern Virginia, Melissa has been the homeless outreach attorney, a staff attorney, and the managing attorney of both the Hampton and Norfolk offices, and is currently the deputy director and director of litigation. While she has experience in all areas of poverty law, she is particularly passionate about housing law and the preservation of subsidized housing to protect our most vulnerable community members. Melissa has served on the board of Southeastern Virginia Homeless Coalition and is currently on the board of Virginia Beach CASA. Thank you, Melissa.
Thank you very much for having me here today. I'll speak for a few minutes and just introduce the Legal Aid Society of Eastern Virginia and our work. We are a nonprofit law firm. Our main office is in Norfolk, and that office serves the cities of Virginia Beach, Chesapeake, Portsmouth, and Norfolk. And we have a smaller satellite office on the Eastern Shore that serves Accomack and Northampton. We also have an office in Hampton, and that Hampton office services the peninsula. We provide services to clients in Newport News, Hampton, Williamsburg, York, Poquoson, all the way up to James City County. And then we have a small satellite office also staffed by one attorney in Williamsburg that sits in the William and Mary campus. What Legal Aid does is we provide free legal services to people who are at 125% of the poverty level and below. We don't provide any assistance in criminal matters, personal injury matters. The biggest area of law that we focus on is housing law, and that is eviction prevention, addressing habitability issues in units, working on preservation strategies for affordable housing. We also provide assistance on family law matters. We prioritize victims of domestic violence. We represent them in protective orders, custody matters, child support, spousal support issues. We provide special education services. And we also assist clients in consumer protection issues, as well as obtaining and appealing the denial of public benefits like SSI, Supplemental Security Insurance, SSDI, TANF, SNAP, Medicaid, Medicare.
Thank you, Melissa. And now I will introduce Gustavo Espinosa. Gustavo is a policy advocate with the Legal Aid Justice Center and senior organizer with the Legal Aid Justice Center Housing and Consumer Justice Program. Gustavo has 5 years of experience organizing alongside low-income renters, particularly in affordable apartment complexes, manufactured home communities, fighting for housing affordability, stability, quality, and rights. Currently, Gustavo is fighting to give Virginia's cities and counties the power to end abusive rent increases. He's also working closely with the residents of a manufactured home community in Chesterfield, strengthening the Residents Association, preventing mass displacement and wealth destruction, and improving the quality of life and stability in their community. He enjoys working directly with community members, as well as working in coalition with other advocates and organizations to build a better commonwealth together. Gustavo is motivated by the conviction that everyone needs and deserves a happy, healthy, and safe place to call home and build community. Thank you, Gustavo.
Thank you, Beatriz, for that introduction. I'd also like to introduce the organization I work for. It's very similar to Melissa's description of the Legal Aid Society of Eastern Virginia. I work for Legal Aid Justice Center, so we exist in that ecosystem of legal aid organizations and other advocacy groups. LAJC is one of the few legal aids in the state that doesn't have federal funding and federal restrictions, so that means we can serve undocumented immigrants, and there's a number of other restrictions we don't have, like we can lobby. I'm also in the General Assembly lobbying, and we have programs that range from housing, that's my main focus. We also do workers' rights, immigrants' rights, youth justice and education, healthcare and public benefits, and criminal legal and racial justice reform. And we have offices in Northern Virginia, in Charlottesville, in the Richmond area, in Petersburg, and we're actually close to opening an office in Norfolk. And so we're also at that early stage of trying to connect with partners in the area. And then the initial focus will be doing outreach with migrant workers. So we exist hand in hand with all the other legal aids. And our organization has attorneys, of course, on staff providing that legal assistance. We have organizers like myself and policy staff. So we're doing a little bit of everything.
Thank you, Gustavo. And now I will introduce Victor Late. Victor is the Chief Executive Officer of Dwell, a workforce and attainable housing provider serving the Hampton Roads region. He is a community leader with a long-standing community commitment to economic development, the arts, and community advancement, serving on one of the board of Friends and of the Creative Vibe District and supporting initiatives such as the International Night Market and several mission-driven nonprofit organizations. At Dwell, Victor leads strategic growth, acquisitions, and operations across the residential and commercial real estate portfolio, with a focus on quality housing and long-term community impact. He resides in Virginia Beach with his wife and 2 young children, where they enjoy an active coastal lifestyle and remain deeply engaged in the local community. Thank you, Victor.
Thank you, Beatriz. Really appreciate that introduction. It's very nice of you. So my name is Victor. I'm with Dwell. We are the leading affordable and workforce housing provider in this region. And first of all, I want to thank you guys for being here, because this is a topic that we live and breathe every day. And to see the support of the community like this to help us and guide us and listen to the needs, this is truly important to us. At Dwell, it's simple. We focus on providing quality but affordable housing to all of our wonderful communities and that we serve, and we continue to stick to our mission and our value systems that will guide us in taking care of our communities, who are hardworking individuals, but are having difficulties in reaching their dreams or wishes of owning homes because of our current state and economy. So really thank you guys for being here. I'm already apologizing ahead of time, by the way, so if I say anything that may be construed, we're just so motivated and just so mission driven to really provide housing for folks, and we try to find ways to make it work, and sometimes it just doesn't work. And so we really want to find solutions with everybody here and the panelists who all can put some ideas together in this discussion, because it's truly a deepening problem that it's just not going to get solved with wishes and dreams. We really have to come out with actionable steps and solutions. And so we're here to provide and serve. So thank you, everybody. Thank you for letting me be a part of this group.
Thank you. And now let's welcome Sharon Schaff. Sharon is a graduate of James Madison University and received a master's degree in urban and regional planning from Virginia Tech. She worked for a nonprofit in Virginia Beach that provides affordable housing to families, veterans, and persons with disabilities for 22 years before coming to work at the City of Virginia Beach in 2019. She is the Housing Development Manager at the Department of Housing and Neighborhood Preservation in the Development Division. which focuses on incentivizing on the development of affordable and workforce housing in the city of Virginia Beach and the city's owner-occupied rehabilitation program for low-income homeowners. Thank you, Sharon.
Thank you. It's great to be here. Again, I work in our development division, is just one of the divisions at the Department of Housing. We also have a rental housing division that handles the Housing Choice Voucher Program. We have code enforcement, and we have our homeless services division that works out of our Housing Resource Center that runs the homeless services and coordinates the continuum of care for the homeless in Virginia Beach. So it's great to be here. I love the topic of affordable housing. I've been doing this now for 30 years, and it's definitely in my wheelhouse, and I'm so happy to meet some of these other folks up here. Thank you, Beatrice, for having me.
Thank you very much. And now let's welcome Chandler Motley. Chandler is a transit planner focused on how transportation systems are designed, operated, and experienced. Her interests span data, infrastructure, and impact of planning decisions. Outside of work, Chandler is deeply engaged in arts and community spaces with a particular interest in accessibility, history, and human systems. Thank you, Chandler.
Thank you for that introduction. I work for Hampton Roads Transit. For those of you who do not know, we provide transit service to Virginia Beach, Chesapeake, Portsmouth, Norfolk, Hampton, and Newport News, and then we connect with Williamsburg's Transit Authority, Suffolk's Transit Authority, and we have a very limited service in Suffolk for their meatpacking plant. We work with the cities independently to provide the service that they want, so we advise them on service impacts and cost impacts, and then they dictate what's that going to look like versus with the amount of funding that they're able to give at any given time.
Thank you. And now we're going to begin with a conversation. And I would like for all of you, starting with our first speaker, to share what is your definition of affordable housing so that everyone in attendance can have a shared understanding of how the panelists, each one of you, defines it. Thank you.
Well, thanks. I would start by saying affordable housing is when somebody's housing costs, which would include either their rent or their mortgage, plus their gas and electricity, are 30% of that person's total income. 30% is sort of the affordable housing burden for most people, and that is how we would define affordable housing.
Yes, that definition of cost burden is very helpful to have a common benchmark. But I think if we're talking about, if 31% means you're burdened, then we want people to actually comfortably afford where they live. So, for example, I pay only a fourth of my income for my housing costs, and that's comfortable, and that's something I can afford. So, my opinion is what's most helpful is to strive for something more like a quarter of our income going to our housing costs, because we don't want housing to be a burden. We want it to be a public good. We don't want people teetering on the edge. And for me, affordability is also not just a snapshot in time of what their income is when they move into the place, but it's also for something to be deeply and stably affordable. We have to know not only can I pay rent next month, but will I be able to continue to live in my home, in my community over the next decade? So for me, deeply and stably affordable housing means if my income changes, so should my rent.
Yeah, so Melissa and Gustavo are correct in the definition of the word affordable based on HUD, criteria. I'm not a big fan of using the word affordable because it's not really, it's just housing. And it's housing that, for folks whose average, income, which this area, by the way, on average has been around 108,000 is the average, or the area median income. So most of the folks that are in our communities and are looking for housing that they can afford, will make an average of $60,000 to 80% of that. And therefore, they have to try to fit their housing needs and cost with that limited amount of income. And so, affordability itself is a larger context. Hampton Roads right now, our average cost of a property is on average $380,000, maybe climbing. So if folks cannot even afford to buy their home because they won't even qualify for a mortgage, because they're spending more than 30+% of all of their income on just infrastructure, which is a roof over their head, and then utilities, which we all need water and we need electricity. And so housing itself that's affordable is a definition that the government and HUD has stated for us from time and hasn't really shifted over. But I think you're right in the sense that if income is not really keeping up with all the costs of expenses and inflation, then it's just going to deepen and make that number have to shift a little bit with our new definition of what that means. So, and hopefully that added on to your definition in the beginning, Melissa.
I'm largely with Victor on the affordable housing and trying not to think too much about the affordability. I focus largely on if we can provide good service to everybody, then it also is going to include the people that may or may not consider themselves living in an affordable housing. Currently, we have some new frequent service. The biggest one is going to be the Route 20 that comes down to the oceanfront on Virginia Beach Boulevard. In the peak times during the day, it runs 15 minutes, every 15 minutes, and we've seen some steady increases in ridership along that, which is a good indicator that more people are able to access this transit. But throughout the entire region, we mostly still have 60 or in some places 30-minute service where the bus is only coming every 60 minutes. And although that is better than no service, it can still really influence the way people get around. Oftentimes, if you get off the bus to go maybe you want to get coffee or to do anything or a detour happens, you're going to have to wait at least in 60-minute increments before you can continue on where you're going. And so it really discourages people from taking transit, or it impacts their choices that they have if they do have to or choose to take transit. So I try to largely focus on if we can provide accessible transit to the entire region, then that's going to lift up everybody. If we just provide access to affordable housing and to their jobs, those people don't have the dignity to go and do other things other than go to their jobs.
It's interesting to bring in the transportation. When I first started working at the housing department, we had a group of people that looked at data, and there was actually a housing plus transportation index that I really like because those are usually the two of the biggest expenses that people have, and childcare is the other one. But again, working in the HUD field all these years, the 30% for rent utilities for renters and their, all the mortgage expenses was sort of the standard. One of the things that our department's doing is an education campaign, and we have been working on this tool so that when people come to some of our events or we do outreach, we're trying to get people to actually engage and do that calculation, because I think, a lot of us pay less. Like you were saying, we pay 20%, and even sometimes that feels tight. So when you start thinking about people who have less income, and less disposable income, and they're paying 30, 40, 50%, it really hits home how little they have left to live on. And I used to work in a transitional housing program for homeless families. A lot of them were working. But we would do budgets with people, and we would look at their net income and really cost out what they could pay, and it's very eye-opening. So yeah, affordability, the 30%'s a great tool to use to sort of measure how is our market doing. That's one of the things that our department does, is we look at those statistics put out by the Census Bureau every year to see how many people are cost burdened. And what you see is over time, starting, in the 2000s, only 38% of renters were cost burdened in the year 2000. but when you look at it today, it's like 53%. So that's how we look at that standard being used and how we use it to gauge what is happening in our market. Because right now in Virginia Beach, we have about 62,000 households, a third of our households who are cost burdened, and that's a huge number. So again, I'll use that definition, but it is different for different people. Thank you.
And we'll stay with you. We're going to give the next question, but I'm going to ask our friends in the audience to raise their hand if they need a card. You're welcome to write a question and raise your hand, and one of the commissioners can come and get the question from you. But also, there is another option. We have a microphone on this side of the stage, and you're welcome to also go there and use it. If you cannot come downstairs, you raise your hand, and somebody could come and bring the microphone to you. Thank you so very much. So now, how do you see, and what is it that you see as the biggest challenge in regards to affordable housing?
For me,
Yes.
just, I guess, working in the city of Virginia Beach, we have a very limited supply of it. When I talk about affordable housing, the other thing I want to bring out is I'm looking at actual units of, dwelling units in our city that have income and rent restrictions. And we have about 4,000, 4,600 units in our city. We need more, and I think one of the biggest challenges right now is the market itself. It's hard to develop in, and that's what we're hearing from a lot of developers. It's hard to get projects to pencil out because of some of the development challenges that are out there. We don't have a lot of land in our city. We do have land that can be repurposed or redeveloped. We have a lot of old shopping centers, for example, that might have some commercial space that's not functioning anymore. So the land is challenging. The interest rate environment is very challenging. The cost to borrow money, just like we hear it in the home ownership realm, but we're looking to attract developers who do large scale and medium scale affordable rental housing. And so, when they're penciling these projects out, the numbers are it's challenging to do. And it was always somewhat challenging to do, but it's gotten more so because the cost of labor, materials has gone up. And there's not a huge amount of additional funding or resources that are being put in to counter that. And so we're challenged with trying to find those resources in our community to make it happen. And we're having some success, but again, it's challenging.
And Chandler, I'm going to ask a different question for you, and this is in regards to barriers. What barriers does public transit face in supporting affordable housing?
Thank you. So I would say the biggest barriers are going to be zoning and land use, and then funding issues. Obviously, buses can only provide service along streets, and because they're very heavy, we can't provide service on any street. They have to be built in a specific way to support the amount of weight. So oftentimes we can't go into suburbs because the pavement is just not going to survive. And then, so that's a big barrier there. And then the other land use is going to be if we have very stratified land uses where we have residential pockets and then we have job pockets that are going to be very far apart from each other, and then other commercial uses like restaurants or things like that. People have to travel a very long time, and the buses are providing service to more than one person, and we can't go off of essentially a straight line on a single street without impacting the people that are trying to go in a different place. So in these land uses don't exist in smaller spaces. People have to, it increases how long they have to be along the transit, and it may encourage them to drive because they can drive directly where they want to go. And then for funding, we work with all of the cities, and they dictate the amount of funds that they can provide. And when we have lots of housing that exists off of these major corridors, it costs the cities more to provide the same level of service to these people because we have to have more buses or more frequent buses on the, we have to have more routes, or we have to have more frequent on the routes that we currently have. So those are the big barriers that we have for transportation.
Thank you. And we'll continue with the rest of the panelists. If you can please tell us, what are the biggest challenges that you see in regards to affordable housing?
So a lot of it's already been mentioned, right? This is not a surprise or any hidden facts here. It's all public. Run out of land, that's for sure. Not more land to build, right? And land is very expensive. You know, the cost of living has risen faster than what people make. So therefore, it's just, the math is not mathing. It just doesn't pencil in. It doesn't pencil in from the cost of land or the cost of assets or property in which you can purchase them and make something happen with that is within reason that the end user, your resident, is not going to have an extreme burden on their hands. Cost of construction has risen. Material cost, they haven't dropped. Mortgage interest rates, they've been, volatile and kind of steady, but let's not forget, in the last couple of years with the 11 rate hikes that came so quickly, it just shocked the market. So then everything just stalled and stopped on this aspect of what we're talking about, which is affordability from a development standpoint. And let's not talk about and not forget about taxes, because we all pay them one way or the other, but real estate taxes, okay? Your assessment value of your properties. Well, I'm not against taxes. We all need to pay taxes. The budget for this city or many cities, our real estate taxes are the largest piece of their budget. It's required. We need it. We can't survive without it. But if we don't have an adjustment of, we call it the capital stack of how to make this thing work, if none of it's working together in unison, it's aligned, then we're really not going to have the outcome that we're in search of, right? I think we said, 62,000 units deficit in Hampton Roads or whatever, southern coastal Virginia. It's got to be 200,000+ in the state of Virginia Beach, or the state of Virginia. If you do the math, we did the math a few years ago. If it takes an average, let's say, ballpark, 3 years to build a 100-unit apartment community, 3 years, from entitlement to people moving in, and we have 62,000, do your math. How long, and it takes, if it takes 3 years to build 100, how long do you think it's going to take to bring that 62,000 back to stabilized level? 1,500 years, 2,000 years? It's not realistic. It's not even realistic if that is the case. But the challenges are multifactorial, and it's not just one thing that's leading to the problem. We've been digging this ditch, and it's just getting deeper and deeper and deeper. And it's just not going to get any better if we don't really step in and step up and work as a whole, whether it's public and private partnerships that can work together, whether it's nonprofits, impact funds, everybody working together to create solutions for this challenge. Because at the end of the day, hardworking folks, and they're the folk. This is the thing. Maybe the definition is construed, but these are just hardworking folks. These are our teachers. These are our healthcare workers. These are our tourism and oceanfront workers. This is your barista. This is your sanitation department. This is the folks that are working for the city. It's just good people who should just live with dignity in a good place that's safe. And so the challenges are numerous for them. And
Well,
To try-
that is a good way to
Oh.
then start right now, kind of like switch and say, what can we do, right? And I want to ask my two other friends that work in the legal realm. Gustavo, I know that you have been at the General Assembly, and for many years, you have been working hard to make sure that some changes take place. And so the partnership that you had with 35 or so organizations, can you tell us a little bit more about that? Because I think what we're looking also is to provide the people that are listening to us an opportunity to see themselves as agents of change. So how can they join you?
Yes, please do join us. We have a concrete solution we've been working for years now to limit abusive rent increases, because as everyone has said, and as Victor just mentioned, it's going to take decades to build the kind of housing that's going to put a dent. And right now we know that landlords take advantage of the lack of supply and know that they can really gouge tenants because there's not other places to go. And if everyone's gouging, then really the landscape is so challenging that we need a bold solution. And the good thing is that all these solutions can work together hand in hand. Like, we need to continue building, but we need a solution like the one I'm about to describe that would have an immediate alleviation for these families. So anti-rent gouging is a bill that was first introduced in 2022 and by Delegate Nadarius Clark, and then by Senator Boysko in 2023. And they've pushed it every single year, including this year when affordability was top of mind for everybody. And every year we run into a lot of resistance because there are folks that benefit from the status quo. There are a lot of people that want to build and want us to get out of this crisis, but there are a lot of people who certain tools scare them because they'll lose a little bit of control over the rent. The rent is already controlled, it's controlled by landlords. And so what this bill would do is allow cities and counties like Virginia Beach, like Roanoke City, like Charlottesville, like Richmond, counties like Loudoun, to put reasonable limits on rent increases so that people can stay in their homes while the supply comes online. Because again, it's going to take years, it's going to take decades, and people are already being pushed out of their cities into the counties, from the counties out into other states. So we're losing hardworking families. People are being ripped away from their friends in school. And so there's so many ways that people can plug into this effort. And like I could spend an hour talking about it, but the gist is that we need more local governments to be bought in. So that means, like, this is not just a state level thing. We need city council and board of supervisors to want this tool and ask the state loud and proud for it. And then we also need to convince our state legislators that this tool makes sense and that we should try it. And then we also need people to join the coalition that's building public pressure more generally. And we need to normalize this idea, because for a lot of people, it's scary, the idea that landlords wouldn't have complete control over the rents.
So can you tell us how people can join those coalitions?
So
Thank you.
the name of the coalition is Allies for Housing Action. You can find us on Instagram. You can also follow Legal Aid Justice Center or New Virginia Majority on Instagram or on our websites, and we'll have updates. We just published a statement about our response to the fact that the bill, again, this year is not progressing. So you can learn more about what's going on. But the bill was sent to the Virginia Housing Commission to be studied, and so we need everybody's perspective as it's being studied. Because essentially the commission is going to see, is this a tool that works in other areas? Is it a tool that can be adapted in Virginia and work? And we need to hear from local governments. We need to hear from regular renters. We need to hear people who have some kind of perspective. And easiest way to connect, if you just want to connect with me directly, I have my business cards and I've brought some literature as well.
Thank you. Melissa.
So I'm going to preface my response by saying that, as Gustavo alluded to at the beginning, I am part of a legal services corporation funded legal aid, which means that there are certain restrictions and prohibitions that we have to comply with, and one of those is we are not allowed to lobby. We're not here to force policy change. We can't engage with the General Assembly, but what I can do in this forum, I think, is really talk about the human impact that we see every day from our clients. We serve the most vulnerable of our community. And just to put it into perspective, when we were talking about the average median income of Virginia Beach being $100,000, our income restrictions, a family of one, the most that anybody who comes to legal aid could make would be $31,000. And then, we deduct, to reach income eligibility for legal aid, we can deduct their rent. But that is the cap. That is the most that a family of one can make. For a family of four, the most that that entire household can make to come to legal aid is $66,000 a year. And we are overwhelmed with people seeking legal assistance. And the vast majority of our clients, it's typically a single family, a single head of household. It's oftentimes a single working parent with children, maybe a grandma taking care of her grandkids, a single working mother with multiple kids, but without housing, their lives fall apart. Housing is really the linchpin. If you don't have a stable home, you are at risk of losing your children to Child Protective Services because you don't have housing. That is an expense then that the cities incur. Housing children and putting children through the foster care system is really expensive. And if a lot of that could be solved on the front end by making sure that there is affordable housing, that is a really big, it benefits the entire community. Along with that, you have increased healthcare costs that go along when there's unstable housing. You have impacts on children. They miss days from school, and that affects their future earning potential. That affects their ability to contribute, as an adult. There are increased costs on the criminal system when life is unstable for people. And so really, really focusing on housing, I think, benefits everybody in the community.
And now for anyone that wants to answer, what are the biggest misconceptions that the public has regarding affordable housing? And yes.
I think a lot of times people think affordable housing is only for the very lowest of income people, but it really hits a wide range of incomes. And I think you were mentioning it earlier too about the 10 years. You might not need it today, but people go through different things in their life, death, divorce, and losses of jobs. So, I was working at the nonprofit when the big financial crisis hit, and we did foreclosure counseling. And, what we would hear is that, the foreclosures were because people took out bad loans. What we actually saw was most of them were fixed mortgages that people could afford. But with that crisis, people lost their jobs. And so then they got stuck in with the house and they couldn't pay their mortgage, or they got another job, but it didn't pay what they got paid before. So that instability really creates a huge problem for households. And I think that's a big misconception that, it's only for people who aren't working or who, don't want to work, when really a lot of times it's for the elderly. We're seeing a huge number of older Americans who really need affordable housing. In fact, when we did a quiz last year when we started our housing campaign, and we asked who is more likely to be rent burdened. Was it boomers or millennials? And most people said millennials, but it was actually the boomer population. So we're seeing, more older adults who need it. But, young people are also experiencing issues as well, especially when it comes to home ownership. So I think that's a misconception that affordable housing is only needed for this one group of people, where it's needed for a very wide swath of people, younger people, older people, disabled, veterans. So that's what I think is a huge misconception. And then the other misconception I see is the quality. We, on our website, we post a lot of pictures of what affordable housing looks like, and you wouldn't really be able to recognize it, or you wouldn't be able to tell the difference between market rate units and affordable developments. A lot of the affordable housing is built using low-income housing tax credits, and Virginia Housing really pushes for that to be quality, really well-built housing. So in our community, it looks good. So that's another misconception, that it's low-quality construction, and it's not. A lot of times it's higher quality, it's more energy efficient. There's a big push to lower utility costs for the residents. It costs more on the front end. I mean, that's one of the biggest challenges, but in the long run, it's a better product. And I think, too, funding affordable housing is really key, because you want to make sure it's well maintained, well managed over the long run. And so that's another aspect of affordable housing that I will advocate for, we in the city will advocate for, is that the development community needs to be supported when they offer to build it and own and manage and maintain it over 30 years or more, because we want it to be an asset to the community, and we want it to be well maintained, well managed, and for the residents to have a good quality of life.
Thank you. And for Chandler, which matrix does HRT use to determine how much service they provide to affordable housing?
Thank you. We have a couple different metrics that we use. The primary one Sharon was talking about earlier, we call it a transportation potential index. It looks at housing, job access, and then also transportation. And it really dictates sort of the people that we think are most likely to benefit and take transportation. We'll also look at the population of an area. Of course, higher density population often results in more people that are able to take transit. And our primary metric currently is single car households or no car households. If you have no car, obviously you're going to be taking some other means of transportation. With the TNCs like Uber that have come around, more and more people are able to get away with no car, but including with public transportation, it's a huge way to get people to move around. Also, poverty and disability are indicators that people are more likely to take transportation. So we have demographics on those that come from census data. People that are disabled, regardless of what that disability might be, are more likely to need some sort of other form of transportation because they can't drive themselves. And of course, with poverty, transportation often is one of the highest costs for a household's budget after housing. So if we are able to remove the cost burden of owning a car, the maintenance of it, the insurance of all of that, and then maintaining your own license, and instead you can take a bus, that reduces cost burden significantly and still provides an amount of access that lets them get around still.
Thank you. Are there any questions from the audience? Yes, go ahead and use the microphone. Oh, one of our commissioners, if you don't mind. Yep. Thank you. Thank you. Has the city considered tiny homes for families or communities?
I think right now the city of Virginia Beach, my understanding, and I'm not an expert on this is really sort of our planning department question, is that they're looking at some changes to the zoning code. We're going through a comprehensive plan update, and I believe March 11th it's going to go to the Planning Commission, and then after that to City Council. Once that a comprehensive plan is completed, then starting probably July of next year, they're trying to get funding for it, but there's going to be a whole zoning rewrite of our zoning code. And that's what actually allows things to happen based on that comprehensive plan. And there's other, I think, ways to kind of look at tiny homes, and one is accessory dwelling units, and that's something that I think our zoning administration is looking at, changing some of, the ability for people to put in ADUs in certain parts of the city. But again, I'm not an expert on that. Tiny homes would have to be part of that zoning code, is my understanding.
Well, great questions that I have here, because following with that, is it difficult to change unused commercial spaces for new housing opportunities? Are there commercial spaces that are unused that somehow can be? Does anybody know the answer to that?
Oh, yeah. Yes, definitely. Yeah. Is it difficult? In what way? Because just what we were just talking about now, zoning and zoning changes, density changes, right? Height restrictions, building code requirements of today to retrofit these older buildings. And just the entitlement processes, timelines, just takes time. It takes a lot of time that's therefore not guaranteed to come to fruition, to put foundation in the ground, to have things moving in the right direction. It just takes time. It's a process that should be just more simple, especially for something of a problem that we know is one of the top 3 problems in our region, right? And so it's multi-complex where, you can consider using land or available space for tiny homes or for ADUs, but does that solve the problem? When we have 62,000? I mean, let's be real. It's difficult to really bring that to reality. Is density something that we need to start looking at in our region? And density means adding more units per acreage so that folks can get their problems solved in a quality way, just like we mentioned, because low-income tax housing is done very well, and that's a misnomer. It is not roach-infested. It is not drug or gang-infested. It won't lower your property values if it's managed well and if it's taken care of by groups who really want to do this. It would probably raise your values because all ships rise with the tides, right? And so commercial properties themselves can be done. I think, I'm not speaking just for specific City of Virginia Beach, but I know the City of Norfolk and Hampton. We have been in communication with Newport News about how can Dwell help solve the problem? What can we do together, public-privately, and try to figure this thing out? Do you have old buildings that can be repurposed? Office spaces that can be converted over? Retail that we can build on top? Maybe these properties built in the 1900s, 1940s got to go because it's 2026 and folks have different needs. We need central air and we need all of our phone hookups. We need, high-speed internet. We're working from home. We gotta stream on Zoom, right? And on Netflix at the same time. So it's like the needs are different, but the standard of living needs to be done appropriately. And so these things are possible if they can pencil with the support of municipalities, and obviously everybody here understands that, and that it's a team effort here to get it done.
Thank you. Yes. Thank you. Good. Use the mic.
I have a question of both Victor and Gustavo. Both of you have indicated, that you're involved with particular companies, but what I didn't hear was more detail about exactly what your companies do. And I heard you talk about the need for the funding and more involvement, but I didn't hear about the funding sources. So I'm really interested in, like, for example, Legal Aid Justice Center. What can the community do to assist you with more funding? And with Dwell, I think if you're private, then where are the funds going to come from to assist you with doing your work? Because all of you have talked about how dire it is. But what can we do to assist you in your efforts? Thank you.
Thank you for the question. So the organization, it's a nonprofit that I work for called Legal Aid Justice Center. We, just like any legal aid, provide free legal assistance. And so some of our funding comes from the Legal Services Corporation of Virginia. So we get some funding from the state. We get some funding from foundations. We get some funding from individual donors. So of course, people can donate to our organization. You can find us online, justiceforall.org. We have this new office that's opening in Norfolk, so what can be helpful is to partner and see how we can have more collaborations as we get opened. But that's how we fund our work. That's how my salary is funded, is a combination of grants and foundation and individual donations.
Melissa, any other? Oh, okay, thank you.
Yeah, I think your question was posted toward Dwell, and what we do is we provide housing. We're just simple. We provide housing for folks who work hard. That's it. And we provide housing perpetuity. You know, our low-income tax housing properties are low income. 50 to 60% of the area median income. We're going to keep it that way, okay? And that's just our mission and our impact. And how does the public help us in putting a dent in this problem? It's honestly just really being here. You know, being at the planning commissions, voicing your opinion, your taxpayers, for all your municipalities, wherever you guys live. And so the folks, you know, in council, and that's the state, work for you. And letting them know that, you know, we need to make some changes. And changes come with, you know, a long-term lens, wider lens, you know. I don't think all of us are going to be here for 100 years, right? But 100 years, our decisions today are going to affect that future, you know, population. And so, you know, voicing your approach for, like we said, zoning, density, process, permitting, supporting local groups like us who actually are here, local. We're not New York, we're not in some other country, we're here local, operating. We know the people, we know the neighborhoods, we know the nonprofits, we know the churches. We all work with the city, Section 8, we work with, you know, PIN Ministry, we work with everybody to make, you know, housing attainable to our folks. And so it's just being of support in that, and then, you know, voting with an informed position, not just based on just emotion of, I don't want that, or not in my neighborhood. You know, it's voting with intention. Look, more housing is going to help us. More housing is going to help you. Okay? More jobs, more people moving here, more housing equals a better overall economy and hopefully a better overall place for everybody here to live. Okay? So just having an informed approach to it and thinking beyond I, but thinking we, how do we do this? Well, it starts with that, the impact on that, voicing your opinion, speaking to your council member, being at these commissions, understanding what's happening in your local city, because every city is a little bit different, but everybody's suffering. You know, and it's voting with the intention of, you know, if you want it to improve and if you really want it to be helpful, it's, you know, it's voting to support it. You know, like you said, where does the funding come from and all the money comes from? Well, it comes from so many different places that we're trying to find, but there's no developer or anybody who's going to come in here and do anything at a loss, because the properties that we have, they're restricted rents. Okay? They're restricted. But the expenses that we have keep rising. And then it keeps just getting narrower and narrower and narrower. So you have to incentivize something. Tax abatement, incentives, grants, something that can really be supportive in a federal, state, local standpoint to move it through. Because do you guys see any cranes around here? Do you see anything building? Or am I just not seeing that? Why isn't it happening? It's policy. We have to change things. We have to support it. We have to incentivize it to move it in a direction. I mean, look at what's happening in other places. You know, California or New York or Montgomery County or St. Paul, Minnesota. It's difficult. People are leaving there from building. They're leaving because they're making it difficult to do it. You don't want roadblocks. You want to be supported into trying to, you know, improve. I mean, look at near us here. I mean, we're what, 3 hours away from Raleigh, North Carolina? Have you been to Raleigh, North Carolina? Charlotte? The explosion that's happened in the state? Because they're supporting it. They're supporting that growth and the jobs and the higher income levels. All of that comes into play. It's not a simple executable solution, but that's where you can start. The public can really start just being informed, understanding, supporting in whatever fashion you think it is. Because change is not easy, but we need some change. I mean, you've been in 30 years. What if, you know, you've seen this literally longer than most in your career. So it's like we need to have that unity and working together to incentivize it because it's just not going to get done. It's just not going to get done.
And it has to come from, you know, the federal government has been getting out of the housing business. When I first started, I guess in 1992, they came out, the federal government had the federal home program, and the home program was supposed to incentivize or provide funding for new construction. And at one point during my career, it was chopped in half. And it's level, right? And so even though we get the same amount every year, the costs go up. So we're basically we're getting funding cuts because the government doesn't say, well, we'll fund you at this level with a 3% annual increase. They don't do that. It's flat. And so we have that issue to deal with. The low-income housing tax credit program, there's always more projects that have their zoning and site control that are ready to go that don't get funded every year. And so there's potential there, but there's a lack of resources. The state has stepped up. The state of Virginia has, when I first started, there was no such thing as a state housing trust fund, but we have that now. We now have a state low-income housing tax credit. But again, with the cost going up, all these things that have been added are not making the impact that I wish they would. And then our community this year, we did a housing study in 2024, it was released. And out of that study came a new program that we put out in September that does incentivize development. It's called the Attainable Workforce Housing Performance Grant. And it basically allows a developer who agrees to build affordable housing, it has to be new construction, to only pay taxes based on the base amount that was there before the development was built. And that's been pretty huge. And we modeled it after a program in Richmond, and it was a real game changer up there. They have about 3,000 some units in the pipeline. Now, Richmond's a very different city than Virginia Beach. We still have all the constraints of land challenges and things like that. And you know, some developers don't want to be in that space. They only want to do market rate because there's other challenges in terms of compliance and with doing affordable housing. But we're trying, you know, we're trying to change. Hopefully our zoning might change so that we, like you said, maybe we can get more density in different places and we can encourage developers to not have to go through the lengthy process of the permitting and getting their units rezoned. But even when we do rezone, you know, it's still challenging.
Are there any other questions? Oh. We have a mic. Somebody can come.
I was wondering if I could speak a little bit.
Thank you.
I was wondering if I could
Yes,
speak a little
please,
bit about
please.
policy as well.
Yes.
I think transportation gets forgotten in a lot of the policy discussions. Transportation is very impacted by especially mixed-use development patterns. In the 40s and 50s, there was a paradigm shift while people were purchasing cars, and that was going to become their new primary form of transportation. Cities began planning around cars. So it was car-oriented development, and the thought is cars are noisy and they create a lot of pollution, and that pushed housing further and further and further away from the places that people need to go. And what we have found is cars also take up a tremendous amount of space, which just further separates housing and the places that people need to get connected with, and it makes it more expensive for transportation to solve that as a possibility. And so what needs to happen is a paradigm shift back into transit-oriented development, where zoning regions are allowed to have housing and commercial areas that occupy the same spaces. You may remember when you're growing up in college that college towns still kind of hold on to this, and maybe your favorite television shows the towns and cities that they live in, or maybe your old hometown still has some of this mixed development because it's been grandfathered in. Really common is you see commercial spaces and then you see apartments stacked on top of them. That's a really dense and mixed-use way that people can develop cities. And it's a different city, of course, but in Chicago, they have adopted compulsory transit-oriented development design policies that makes developers create more dense housing and more dense commercial areas, and they do that by providing mixed uses for the zoning, and also they do height restrictions like Victor was talking about where spaces are allowed to be taller, so you can stack more housing and commercial spaces in the same amount of space because they're moving up vertically. And with Chicago, when they implemented these compulsory policies in 2019, they saw an almost immediate doubling in the amount of job access that people had, and you've seen more and more development along these transit corridors, and you've also seen a reduction in pollution. When one person needs to get somewhere, that's one car, and if another person needs to get to another place, that's two cars. But with a bus, it's the same amount of pollution. So buses just have a tremendous more capacity to move people than cars do, but as housing and commercial areas get separated, it becomes more and more difficult for transportation to provide that as an access.
Now, let's get Gustavo and Melissa. I have here a couple of statements that I want you to pick any of this so you can answer. And one of the questions is, how do we reimagine what housing looks like, or affordable housing looks like? And then another question, why don't we require new developments to put in some small efficiencies? It says, even a building with just hotel rooms would help some people, old-fashioned rooming house. So what about those options? Why is it so challenging?
Yeah, so I can jump in, and I can't speak on the side of zoning or,
Sure.
city restrictions, but really, when you're reimagining housing, one thing to be cognizant of is, what about some housing that is suitable for multi-generational families? If we can support family units as a whole, where you can have, grandmother with their parent, with their children, that could solve some childcare issues. It can support families when a caregiver is sick. If there's more than one adult in the home, then the children can still be cared for. So thinking about perhaps what you can do to encourage multi-generational housing units, but then also exactly that idea of more choice. A hotel room, an efficiency, might be the most suitable thing for a single, working adult. New college grad, single family, or, one person in the family. To have access to a lot of different options, I think, is really important in terms of solving the housing crisis that we currently find ourselves in.
Yeah, I think that's spot on. I think the reason we don't have all those options now is because of racism. Like the purpose of zoning has always been to allow certain kinds of housing, and not allow other kinds of housing, because really the goal is to not allow certain kinds of people to live in certain kinds of neighborhoods. And so I could see a similar issue running into the efficiencies that, oh no, we don't want a whole bunch of single people living here. We don't want people that can only afford to live in an efficiency living in this neighborhood. So I think it comes down to zoning, and it also, ultimately, zoning comes down to what does the public want, because zoning decisions are often public decisions. And so part of the solution there is neighbors talking with neighbors and trying to slowly break down those negative stereotypes people have, those stigmas people have about, I want my neighborhood to look like this because I don't want those kinds of people to live here. So I think like when we're talking about reimagining housing, we have to reimagine who's living in the housing, what kinds of neighbors are we open to. I think that's how we're gonna live in more utopian, even transit. Like there are some localities that didn't want the bus system to come into their areas because they don't want city folk coming into the county. So when it comes to zoning and it comes to transit, we have to reimagine, what we're open to because we want to live in harmony with each other.
Thank you. Now, let's go again down the line, and I want you to share with us, what is it that your organization is doing, to ease the pain, the need for affordable housing, and then we're gonna go into the other question, which we want the public to get engaged and to get involved. So let's answer that question, and we'll come back with, again, having you tell the community how they can partner with you and be part of the solution. Thank you. Starting here with Sharon.
Okay. So I had mentioned what our organization is doing, or what our department is doing. We try to the extent that we have resources, incentivize the development community to produce more affordable housing. We try to use our federal funding to offer affordable housing opportunities. We are considering, or we pretty much made a decision, we're going to put some funding out for down payment and closing cost assistance, because affordable housing isn't just one type of housing, right? It's not just rentals, it's affordable home ownership as well. In fact, my first job at the nonprofit was working in something called the Hope 3 program, which was a affordable first-time home buyer program. And so that's really near and dear to my heart, helping people get into their first home. So again, the main reason we went with this Attainable Workforce Housing Performance Grant is that because our city council was looking at the budget and they didn't really have the funding, we looked at doing an affordable housing trust fund, but there just wasn't money to do that. So this Attainable Workforce Housing Grant was a great way to not have to dip into your current budget or raise taxes. It's actually tax money generated that wouldn't have been there unless you had incentivized that development. So we thought that was a great program to adopt. So that's basically what we're trying to do at the housing department.
So with Hampton Roads Transit, we act as transportation experts, and we advise the cities on the different sorts of transportation impacts that their decisions might make, and then we act as good stewards of the money that they do give us. We look at census data to try to provide transportation to the people with the most need first, and as we have more resources, we provide transportation to places that may have less of a need and may just want to have transportation. Also, I think many people that live in this region may think of themselves as their identity as part of their city, but I think most people think of themselves, their identity as Hampton Roads rather than a specific city. Where city government is limited, they have to think within the boundaries of their city. Hampton Roads Transit is regional, so we can think about things more regionally than a city can. So we might advise a city based on things that are happening in other parts of the region in the ways that they can't or don't think about already. So I think that's one of the biggest things that Hampton Roads Transit does.
Thank you, Victor.
Yeah, so At Dwell, we have different levers that we pull. Okay, so lever one is the acquisitions or buying of the place or building of the place. We have to identify properties that are dilapidated, falling apart, or coming from groups who are not taking care of their property, and buy it right. Because if we buy it right with the right lending sources of support, then we can control and restrict the rents at the end of the day for our community. And we consult experts. We've consulted experts on design. We're talking about reimagining living. Well, we're looking at that. What does living look like 50 years from now? The current young population is working remote, working from home. They want to have green space. They want to be having walkability to the Trader Joe's or to the coffee shop or to their gym. They want to have safety, security. They want to have a communal space for everybody to gather, right? But they don't necessarily need a 2,000 square foot apartment anymore. They're not looking for that. They're just, we talked about efficiency, we're talking about these things. Yeah, a lot of folks have gone to single, at least in our community, single person living. And we're talking about transportation, not a lot of them are, if they have the right location, are even wanting a car. They're not really needing it. They're using public transportation or your drive share services to get around, or biking everywhere. So the acquisitions, and the redesigning side of things is we're looking at that and trying to identify, where is the most need? How does this need to be? How do we need to acquire it? And what is the most responsible way of working with our local lenders, our credit unions, our nonprofits, or some of our impact funds, some of our impact investors that you guys are in your community here and they support it. And then our next lever we pull is management. It's our end. We have hospitality and customer service as our number one priority. Safety. When you see a place falling apart, it's because people are not caring for it. And so, and let's be clear on this. We all deserve to have a safe place to live with dignity. And so we all want the same things. So when your toilet gets clogged at 2 o'clock in the morning and you need somebody to be there, but they're not showing up, then that's a problem. And so maintaining your property, focusing on the community's needs, focusing on their safety, focusing on, bringing a better quality of life for the folks there, right, with resident events or bringing in folks who provide financial literacy programs like we do to just make sure that we want folks learning and educating themselves on building their way out of their current financial state. And then lastly, we have a construction side of things. And that construction side of things, we focus on longevity and long-term. We build with the quality and longevity because over time, the asset or the property degrades. And so we think of the long-term solution, not the cheapest and fastest way to do it, but what is the long-term solution to build something that, when we turn over, we have less costs. When we have, certain requirements by city or for fire safety, sprinklers or fire extinguishers, that we're able to meet that. And we look at turning units and making sure they're ready for the families coming in. I mean, the simplest things. I mean, you move into a new place from just having a distressed state, or some folks who are near homelessness, sleeping out of their car, and they're still working, but they just can't make ends meet, and they come into us, in distressed state. They just want a warm shower, so let's keep their hot water on. They just want heating, Believe it or not, they do want internet, so their internet service is ready for them to hook up day one. It's already there for them, like things like that we think about as, and just a little bit of a basket. Maybe you don't have a soap, maybe you don't have a toothbrush, maybe you don't have trash bag for whatever, We think about all these different things on our construction side of things just to make sure that the whole resident experience, a part of the Dwell community, is looked at. And that's kind of where we come in and try to figure that way out, because at the end of the day, we're trying to, every single vendor we talk to, every single place we can negotiate is one extra dollar that we can save, that we don't have to bring it back down to the trickle down back to our residents. We're trying to limit that to them because we want them to, be at home, peace, and not worry about, their stressors, because when your income starts depleting, the pressure starts rising, and we see it all the time. We see it in every application, in every family meeting that we have with the families, and we see it in delinquencies. We see it in folks having a hard time just making ends meet. So we find ways to work with our community and with our nonprofits just to help make things work for everybody, and it's more of a win-win-win situation.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Gustavo.
Yeah, so I mentioned that at Legal Aid Justice Center we have organizers, policy staff, and attorneys, and we also have health navigators. But when it comes to housing, I can give a few examples of how each of these roles, we work together to help people solve their problems. So, for example, when I worked and lived in Charlottesville, there were a number of low-income housing tax credit properties where there were a lot of evictions. There were really bad conditions and a lot of mass evictions. And so I would keep an eye on those communities online because, it's public data when there's evictions in the courts. And I would find their addresses and visit them and explain. Some people, that was the first time they were hearing about their evictions because the notice fell off their door, or they just weren't served, or went to the wrong door. And a lot of people just didn't know their rights. So part of what we do at LAJC is intervene by giving people something like a fighting chance, right? We have attorneys that try to find, is there something that the landlord missed, right? But sometimes that's a Band-Aid on a bullet wound, because then the landlord can just refile. If the underlying issue is that the rent is too high, then the problem is that the rent is too high. So that's our attorneys work fearlessly, and they work miracles to help people stay in their homes. And we also have these organizing campaigns. For example, in Louisa County, there was a mobile home park where their rent was increased without any notice. And so the attorneys helped file several lawsuits, and then I, as an organizer, helped bring the residents together, formed a resident association, and they got to engage with the landlord and try to negotiate something. And eventually they got that illegal rent increase rolled back, not just for the 16 plaintiffs, but for everybody. And so that was a major win. And then at a different mobile home park in Chesterfield, I've been working more recently, and there people's homes were at risk because of code enforcement. And so what organizing is bringing people together around a shared goal, helping them form a group that can last and has a structure, and help them recruit people, help them motivate people to join the fight. And we were able to help people stay in their homes, but there's still this issue of the rent keeps going up. And so that's where the policy comes in, that we're in the General Assembly trying to change the laws so that there is actually some kind of protection. Right now, a landlord can double, triple, quadruple your rent every year. And so that's what we're doing at LAJC, is working with all these other organizations to try to put a reasonable limit on rent increases.
Thank you, Melissa.
And what we do at the Legal Aid Society of Eastern Virginia is we provide direct representation to low-income citizens. So we are in court on a regular basis, and what I tell landlords and landlords' attorneys all the time is that we're not going to represent somebody in court if they don't have a legal defense. Like, if you do everything properly and there's no legal defense we can bring, we're not, we're going to give the tenant, education and advice, but we're not going to represent them in court. However, there is a significant power imbalance between landlords and tenants, and there are an incredible number of evictions that are done improperly, where rent is not properly calculated, ledgers don't line up, notices are not given in accordance with the law. And so we are in court every day fighting for tenants' rights to ensure that the law is complied with. Because unless a tenant is treated with dignity and respect and is an equal partner in the relationship, it is it's not conducive to a better community where everybody feels heard and everybody wants to respect the rules. So when property managers are not providing correct notices, are not adequately, providing accounting, then that is a problem. And so our role is to go in there and correct the power imbalance, ensure that, the tenants' voices are heard, and ensure that any eviction that we represent on that goes forward, if there is, that we are standing up for our tenants' rights our clients' rights under the law, and that no improper eviction is happening on our watch to our clients. The other component of that we do a lot of work on is tenant education. There are so many situations where a tenant comes to us and they are behind on rent, not necessarily because they didn't have the money to pay that rent in the first place, but because there were conditions issues with their unit. And they asked their landlord to fix the heat, the AC, the plumbing, the leak, the mold, and they provided proper notice to their landlords, and their landlords didn't do it. And out of frustration, they withheld their rent because that was the only thing that they could think of to get their landlord to listen to them. So we do a lot of work in that space also.
Thank you. And we have a question from the public.
Thank you. First of all, I just want to state how wonderful the work each and every one of you do, and the organizations that you represent, the different silos, but making the interconnectionalities today, I think, is really, really powerful. You've covered the terrain, land scarcity. We go on to density fear. Density is a bad word, and we need to be expanding our imaginations. And you all have the key to all that. Chandler, some of the transportation connections you've made. And I believe, as a 40-year advocate, as a partner, an ally, that we've addressed every one of those. I've worked with many of you, Gustavo, many Saving a Mobile Home Park campaign, we've been with. Sharon Schoaf, with every model that gets mentioned and lifted, we're right there, working for most especially the affordable housing in the lower income spectrum, because luxury units and those in that higher end, I don't see a huge deficit with. I see the deficit huge, and you all cannot begin to have the resources needed. So I'm thinking from a standpoint of visioning with you. First of all, thank you for what you're doing and continue to do it. We have seen even some models here that have been very successful. A single room occupancy unit, which was a huge issue in this region, was led by a city initiative, Andy Friedman, that, the regions all contributed together, ended up putting these units in different cities, and it was heralded as a model. And you've all lifted some models here. I think we're just not framing the whole thing correctly. We will die as a city if we don't have housing, because housing is the springboard by which everyone can contribute. So we have to make it about economics. I know this is a long-winded rant, and I do think you're starting to do that, but how do we get those leaders? And not just city council folks, but we can be passing something on a state level, and then at the local level, they kill it. It back and forth, the ping pong ball goes, when it all will benefit all of us. Housing will benefit each and every one of us, and every penny that we spend well. And that's what we have to prove, is that we're going to spend it well. And so all of the models that are going well, that are expanding density, how do we gather those up and then help not our city leadership, state leadership to work together, as well as the developers? They've got to quit being the bad guys, and we've got to give them the incentives to build. So how do we do that? Does it start with a visioning from all of you, because you're the experts and you tell us what works and doesn't? Sharon, you all are doing it great when you show what a good affordable housing unit looks like online, but people aren't hearing. And I do include our city leadership, our elected leaders. I think they just don't know because we have not defined it as an economic issue. We will not rise economically if we don't make it an economic priority to provide mixed use, mixed models. Everything needs to be in the mix. Tiny homes, ADUs, anything anybody can think of. Why aren't we doing that instead of just making that 62,000 unit deficit increase by the minute? Thank you. Some ideas about how we could do that is what I'm asking
does
the panel.
anybody want to answer, tackle? It was a lot, but, and we have a short time just to keep us focused.
I think Gustavo brought it up a little bit not too long ago, where racism, I can't imagine that's not the biggest impact, is people don't want certain people to live in places. And so providing low income or affordable or accessible housing is bad for their view on the world, because they're going to be around people that they don't want to be around. I think that's going to be the biggest challenge, and that is in all aspects. People that even don't think that they're acting in a racist way, or even people that might think that they are, they're all benefiting from and encouraging this system, from the local legislative level to the state level down to the actual citizens. And so I think we have to kind of get around that. I think as far as a transportation angle, everyone here should take the bus sometime this week. I think it'll really change the way that you think about transportation, and especially the way that transportation exists right now. We only have 3 routes across the entire 6 cities that provide frequency that is 15 minutes or greater. The rest of it is almost all hourly, and it takes a long time to get anywhere because of how spread out things are. And so we're not doing anything in the transportation side because we're dictated by the policies, which is influenced by citizens. So that's the transportation angle for it.
Wow, and that is a good angle. That's a good invitation for our community. Let's do that, and let's do that when the weather is hot, or when it is raining, or when it is very cold, right? Okay, anybody else?
I think what I would do is I would challenge everybody to engage with all different people in your community and change the paradigm. There is a lot of, I'm going to go and I'm going to volunteer, and I'm going to provide you with resources. I'm going to tell you what is a good thing to do. I'm going to tell you to go to financial counseling classes. We work with a lot, all of our clients are low income. A lot of them struggle financially because they're poor, not because they know how to budget, not because they don't know how to budget. I would say that a lot of my clients are extraordinarily good at budgeting. It is just that between the constraints of, childcare and transportation and rent and the minimum wage that they make, and oftentimes a lot of our clients are working 50 hours, they're working 2 jobs to try and make ends meet. Our perception is that oftentimes organizations and people talk down to them instead of really partnering with people and treating them as individuals, walking alongside them, and treating them as equal partners. Instead of, telling people what you think they need, asking them what they need, and really addressing it on every conversation you have can be a game changer. So I think just considering everybody's different point of view and considering everybody as an equal partner in the conversation can go a long way towards creating a more inclusive community.
Thank you. And I think there's another question. Thank you.
Yes, I appreciate, this was very informative, and I was able to consider a lot of things that I had not considered. But I do see some glimmers of hope. Victor, you said a few pieces around, one, all the retail land that we have. So much is moving towards online. There's so many empty buildings around here that we can completely repurpose. So I see some glimmer of working with our local elected development and elected officials around how we could, repurpose those retail spaces for residential spaces. You also mentioned that there are some developers that are doing it well. I'd like to know, which developers are doing it well, and how can we work with, again, our city officials to incentivize those developers to do more well. You also hit a good point. Business people are not going to build or make these housing options if there's not income or if it's not lucrative. You got to make money. Again, so finding the land, finding the people who can do the development, incentivizing the development, I think we would be on track to really bringing and presenting some good solutions that could actually work. Yes, state government help, maybe federal government as well, but these seem like some good first steps, and I wonder if our local electeds maybe have, I'm sure they do, the planning has a inventory of where these empty retail spaces are, but maybe the citizens, we can demand now that we rezone the commercial to residential and get some plans going to get these places built. And then the people who build the renting, you said you have a good scope on the companies that rent that are doing it well for affordable rent. So I think all of you are wonderful resources on this conversation tonight, and I will do everything I can to help advocate for the great work that you all are doing. Thank you.
Thank you, Sharon. And that brings us to the closing statements, and I appreciate it if you all take a turn, not only to tell us what your wonderful organization is willing to do to work with the community directly, but actually, what hope is there for people in our community to be civically engaged and to partner with you to further the efforts to meet the needs of the community. Do we start here with Sharon? Yes.
Like I said, we're running an education campaign this year, but you can go to virginiabeach.gov/housing matters. There's a lot of educational materials on there, but it also, we have ways that you can engage. And you can sign up. We have a newsletter that comes out at least once a month that keeps people informed about what's going on in housing. And if you're trying to be informed about what might be coming and you want to advocate for something, that's something we can inform you about as well. The way things happen in our city, when there's a rezoning application, the city council hears from constituents. And a lot of reasons that they sometimes pass and approve these projects is because they know what the need is. So that's another thing. If you or somebody, or people who need affordable housing, let them know. Because they need to hear all voices and not just, a small number of citizens who have a certain interest. So that's one thing that I want to leave people with is your voice counts and you need to make it heard.
Thank you.
I think the biggest thing for transportation people can do is to take the bus more. The more people that are on our buses, the more that we can show the cities that people want it. One of the things that we could do is go to our own employers and encourage them to try to have some sort of partnership with HRT. We have one with the shipyard where we provide lots of access to the shipyard workers. Or even internally, there are some businesses that provide parking stipends for employees that don't park at their facility and they take transportation instead. And that can also reduce the parking liabilities for a business, which then they can reduce the land use for parking, which is an incredible amount of space. We're also very regulated by policy, so if people go to their city hall, their city council meetings, and ask for better transportation, and a great way to get to those is by taking public transportation, and asking your local leaders if they are taking or if they will take public transportation to different things, and also thinking about how can I get somewhere with transit even if you're not going to take it. Just the more that we think about transportation as an aspect, the more we're going to think about that when we're thinking about things that aren't specifically for transportation.
Victor?
The best thing that I would say when we look at hope and looking towards the future is that, there's a group like us, all of us that are on this table that are out here fighting to try to get what's right and to do what our community actually needs versus just talking about it. And everybody brought up some great points because, reimagining things, we're looking and reimagining, like I said, looking at office buildings or hotels and how do we create efficiencies, add kitchens and add ways for folks to come in and out of their homes and looking at the ways that, if we can't develop it because land is scarce, then how can we repurpose things? And so we are thinking about this on a regular daily basis and working through it and communicating with the economic development departments of each of our cities to see what their needs are. And they're all in need. And they all have problems. And they all have properties that are getting older and older and older and falling apart. And they don't know what to do with it. And so incentivization to get it done together, and it takes public-private partnerships to do so. Cities, can provide support in many ways, whether it's land, abatement, municipal bonds to make things work in the right direction. If you're investing in your city is going to grow, and we need to recognize that. This is a sprawling metropolis, right? We have a bunch of just flat single-family homes throughout the whole area of the 757. It's not like that anymore, though. Population has grown significantly. We're almost over 2 million people, 500,000 almost in Virginia Beach alone. That is good and bad problem to have. But the more we incentivize our local government and create awareness, show support to bring businesses here, bring jobs here, bring folks the opportunity to have a great place to live in safety near the good schools where they can walk and not feel like they're in danger. And I think that's where the hope is that there's a lot of folks out here that are trying to do good. They're not all bad. They're trying to really do what they can to put a dent in this large problem that is not just ours in this region. This is nationwide. I think certain areas have done a good job. Certain other cities have done a good job in providing support, and you've seen that. It's in the headlines. You're starting to see what's happening, and everybody rushing to Florida, and everybody rushing to South Carolina, and North Carolina, and Texas. Why? Why is everybody going there? Why aren't they coming here? What do we not have to offer that everybody else has? Start looking at those things and start speaking up about it with your, local government and supporting ways that will add more to the benefit of the whole in this region, because our population, is in this region. Our industries have been, military, government defense, I guess tourism, right? And all that is changing. And we want to make sure that we change with the times and adjust our expectations. Adjust our expectations for the needs and services of our current population, and adjust our expectations and needs of the services for our future population. Because we're thinking that way moving forward, and any decision that Dwell makes is what is the other side of this decision looking like, to make sure that we're making the right call for the longevity and long-term mission that we're really trying to accomplish on a daily basis.
Thank you. Gustavo?
Yeah, my closing statement is thank you for listening, and an invitation also to connect, because as a community organizer, I used to be kind of shy, but this role, I knock on people's doors at 8, 9 p.m., and I try to make the case for why they should talk with me and connect more and join a fight and talk to their neighbors and try to organize their neighbors. And one small example of why I came here, I live in Richmond City, so I drove like 2 hours to be here, and I've driven like 2 hours to Franklin County or even longer, because I've noticed that just meeting one person at an event like this can make such a huge difference. I met somebody through a town hall in Roanoke City, and then that person, we just kept emailing back and forth. They were asking, how do you do tenant organizing? And eventually they went to their city council meeting right before the General Assembly, and they made the case for why this bill should be on the city's agenda. And it just took one person providing public comment to start a debate, and then eventually they put it on that year. And so there's 133 localities in the state, and I obviously can't go to each and every one, but I'm hoping to build my network, get to know more people that are really passionate about this, so that not just during the General Assembly, but like the person said earlier, like we have something we win at the state level, and then we're really struggling to get it at the local level. That's when we need cities to work together. We need to share examples, like things that work in Richmond that then Virginia Beach is trying. So this, my pitch is basically, if anybody wants to connect, I'll be here, because I don't want to drive back to Richmond not having met anybody. So thank you.
Thank you.
I'll be very brief as the last speaker. I wanted to just thank everybody for being here and being part of the conversation. And I think that is really what everybody can do going forward, is to ask those questions, think outside the box. If your first instinct is to say no, stop and think about why that is your first instinct. And what are the factors that are prompting you towards that answer? And can you open your mind and think about another person's perspective and how that may change how you conduct yourself and the things that you do and the things that you're passionate about going forward.
Thank you. Please join me in thanking our wonderful group of panelists for sharing their time and their expertise with all of us. And friends, I'm going to invite you to visit across the room here our resource tables. We have a lot of organizations that came with resources for all of us. And friends that are joining us virtually, I am going to ask them to please join the Virginia Beach Human Rights Commission on our future forums. And we are having 2 forums this year, and I invite you to join us and follow us on Facebook so that you can find out the dates. And I know that the next forum is going to be on issues of health, but it is you who makes this conversation very, very important. So please join us. And thank you, everybody. Have a wonderful day.